every day billions of people make choices about food. We stop by the supermarket, eat out with friends, or grab a snack on the go. We like to believe that what we eat is entirely our choice, shaped by taste, culture, and convenience. Yes, it's true, but just in part. Do I really know where this cereal bar comes from? Or this little chocolate? How many people made it possible for me to grab this cereal bar off the shelf at the supermarket? We often rely on trusted brands, familiar labels, companies we think we know, but we don't really know the world that lies behind. But if you really dive into this question, it's pretty fascinating to realize that behind these retail brands, these food chains, and the long list of everyday goods, you somehow always end up tracing it all back to the same four major names. A is for ADM, B stands for Bunge, C is Cargill, and D is Louis Dreyfus. But what's even more incredible is that behind these enormous international corporations that actually go all the way back to the 19th century, there aren't nearly as many people as you might think. You've eaten their food, possibly today, possibly 3 times today. This is the story of the biggest of them all, the largest private business in the US, owned by a single family that has been feeding the world for over 160 years. And yet, we've never even heard its name. Ask someone to name the biggest food company in the world. Most will say McDonald's, or maybe Starbucks. But actually, that's wrong. Those are some of the most recognized food brands on the planet. But the biggest player in global food isn't one you've ever visited. In the global food system, real power doesn't come from branding. It comes from control of crops, of trade routes, of raw ingredients. The ABCD move every day the vast majority of the world's agricultural and food commodities. They don't serve your meal. They move the wheat, the soy, the corn, the oil, the cocoa that make your meal possible. One of the ABCD is not just the biggest of the four. It's the largest private company in the US and the 4th in the world. It is present in over 70 countries and reach over 125 countries in the world, touches nearly every part of the global food chain. This company is Cargill. McDonald's made about $26 billion in revenue last year. Starbucks, around $36 billion. Add Coca-Cola and you get a total of roughly $110 billion. Now, compare that to Cargill, whose name you've probably never heard. Annual revenue, $165 billion. That's 50% more than McDonald's, Starbucks, and Coca-Cola combined. It has no restaurants, no logos, no advertising. Cargill has endured through some of the most turbulent moments in modern history. The Great Depression, 2 world wars, 2 global pandemics, and multiple financial crises. And incredibly, they're still here. Stronger than ever. What's truly astonishing is that behind this massive enterprise stands not a government, not a public corporation, but a single family. The Cargill-Macmillan family. A true dynasty that has quietly held the reins of one of the most powerful and invisible empires in the world, still controlling the 88% of the company's shares. Just 20 people. And remarkably, 14 of them are billionaires. But what makes Cargill unique isn't just its size. It's the way that size is structured, a vertical system, built to be in control of the global food supply chain. To understand Cargill, you have to start with farming, because agriculture is where everything begins, and it's where Cargill is most present. Cargill doesn't own most farms, but it works with hundreds of thousands of them all over the world. And not just as a buyer, but also as a partner. Cargill gives farmers what they need: the seeds, the fertilizers, the feed for animals, and sometimes even the money to start their season. They have a financial department created to support farmers in maximizing production, and an entire department dedicated to fertilizers sold to their network of producers. In return, those farmers become part of Cargill's ecosystem. And when the crops are ready, wheat, corn, soy, oilseeds, Cargill is there to buy them. Every day it purchases agricultural products from every corner of the world, and every year it trades over 200 million tons. About 1 out of every 4 tons moved on the global food market. In Brazil alone, it exported over 15 million tons of soybeans in 2023, more than any other private company, using its own ports along the Amazon River. Moving forward, Cargill doesn't just trade raw agricultural goods, it transforms them. Through a network of more than 500 industrial plants in over 70 countries, Cargill takes what it buys and processes them into new forms. Inside these facilities, raw commodities become ingredients. Raw wheat is transformed into wheat flour, sugar beet into white sugar, and cocoa beans become cocoa butter. Cargill is one of the world's largest producers of soybean oil, lecithin, cornstarch, and industrial cocoa. Core ingredients used in everything from baked goods to soft drinks to chocolate bars. But agriculture is just one side of Cargill's business. There's another massive operation at the heart of the company: meat production. In the UK, its poultry facility in Hereford handles over 2 million chickens a week, primarily for McDonald's. In the US, Cargill produces nearly 8 billion pounds of beef each year, making it one of the country's top 3 meat processors. Each Cargill beef plant produces enough to feed, on average, 23 million people. And with 4 major beef facilities in the United States alone, that means nearly 100 million people eat Cargill beef every single day. And what applies to farms, where Cargill provides seeds and fertilizers, also applies to livestock. Because Cargill runs another massive business in beef, poultry, and turkey, where it supplies the feed that these animals need to grow. As unbelievable as it may seem, that a single company controlled by just one family does all of this, it's actually only part of what Cargill does, because Cargill isn't just a producer. Indeed, one of Cargill's most powerful assets isn't just what it grows or processes, it's what it can store. Because from that comes a form of control that make them unique in the whole world. Across the world, Cargill controls a vast network of silos, warehouses, and port terminals, and they are profiting with them, massively. Here's how it works. When markets are flooded with supply and prices drop, most producers have to sell immediately in order to secure the most profitable price possible on their produced goods. But not Cargill. It can buy in bulk when prices are low and store the excess, quietly, strategically waiting. Then, when supply tightens and prices begin to rise, Cargill can release its stock, gradually, selling at the most profitable moment. This practice has a name in commodity trading. It's called storage arbitrage. As explained by the Financial Times and the European Parliament, storage arbitrage allows dominant players to buy low, hold inventories, and sell high, profiting from price movements over time. But Cargill's strategy goes beyond timing. Unlike most players, Cargill isn't just reacting to market conditions. Nothing at Cargill is left to chance. In over 160 years of history, Cargill has built an entire division within the company that analyzes satellite images, monitors real-time data from every part of its business, and creates projections based on vast historical data and real-time forecasts. It often sees these changes coming before anyone else. Cargill uses satellites to make predictions about the harvest and to anticipate specific risks that may arise throughout the year, thanks to an inexhaustible source of data that no one else currently possesses, not even public institutions. And finally, you can add the last piece of the puzzle: transportation. The company charters over 600 cargo ships every year, more than the navies of Canada or Italy. It manages railcars, grain terminals, port access, and inland logistics. It operates a private highway for food, invisible but essential, made up of dedicated logistical corridors, rail lines, ocean routes, and highways, along with infrastructure built to maximize efficiency across the global food supply chain. But what naturally comes to mind at this point is, how has a single family managed, over the course of more than a century, to build such an empire? One so influential that it extends beyond national governments, all without relying on capital from the financial system. Cargill's story begins back in 1865. The American Civil War ends, the country begins rebuilding, and one of the government's top priorities is to connect its vast territory, which in the second half of the 19th century is very fragmented. Small areas centered around large urban hubs, but with few connections between them. To do that, it invests heavily in railroads, especially starting from the Midwest, heading toward the East Coast. It's the Transcontinental Railroad, a project that connects Omaha with California. William Wallace Cargill sees this opportunity early. He's not a farmer, he doesn't own land or harvest crops, but he notices something others miss. There's no system to connect farmers with distant buyers. So in 1865, Cargill buys a grain flat house next to a railroad line in Iowa. It's a small warehouse, but in a key location. He's betting on movement, not production, and what happened is that Mr. Cargill was actually right. This moment marks the beginning of a major transformation in the American economy. From the Midwest, the first railways begin to be built. In those lands where there were once only vast stretches of farmland, the arrival of the railroad is a true revolution. Trains begin to move throughout the Midwest, expanding horizons, transporting goods, and soon grain as well. The railroads open up the western frontier, allowing farmers to grow more wheat and transport it further than ever before. Cargill is becoming the middle layer between supply and demand. By the early 1900s, William Wallace Cargill had strategically built and acquired nearly 100 grain elevators across Iowa, Minnesota, and Wisconsin. Initially, his approach was simple yet powerful. Purchase grain directly from local farmers, store it strategically, and sell it when market conditions were favorable. Cargill's model hinged on buying grain at low prices during harvest, leveraging seasonal oversupply. He would store massive amounts in elevators located strategically near railroads, waiting patiently for prices to rise. When market demand surged, especially in large urban centers and industrial hubs like Minneapolis and Chicago, Cargill sold his stored grain at significant profits. And these profits didn't just sit idle. They were consistently reinvested into expanding storage capacities and improving logistical infrastructure, building a cycle of continuous growth. However, one of Cargill's most enduring strategic moves was deeply personal, integrating family alliances into the business. In 1898, he brought John H. McMillan Sr. into the fold by marrying him to his daughter, Edna Clara Cargill, effectively securing family continuity and stability in corporate leadership. After William Cargill's passing, John H. McMillan Sr. stepped in to lead the company. The First World War brought a rapid expansion. The conflict caused a surge in demand for grain and agricultural raw materials. Cargill, already a major grain trading company, seized this opportunity to grow. Soon, trade routes expanded toward the East Coast, and through the St. Lawrence Seaway, access to European markets was unlocked. Riding the momentum of a rising United States, which during and after the Second World War would cement its role as a global power, Cargill positioned itself as a major grain exporter. But after the war, America entered the era of the Great Depression, marked symbolically by Black Monday in 1929. Even earlier, between 1920 and 1921, there had already been a collapse in agricultural prices. Cargill suffered heavy financial losses. The value of the grain stocks accumulated during wartime plummeted, leading to an internal crisis. It became clear that depending solely on grain was risky. Cargill began to diversify in the 1920s, and this strategy accelerated during and after the Great Depression. The company recognized that grain markets were too volatile to guarantee reliable income and long-term sustainability. And in the end, this marked a pivotal moment. The decision was made to diversify revenue streams. But if we look at it in perspective, this moment is also extremely important because marked the beginning of Cargill Empire as we know it today. Cargill began by investing in grain storage infrastructure and transportation. To reduce its reliance on third-party carriers and gain greater control over distribution, the company acquired its own barges and ships. In the 1930s, Cargill entered the animal feed business. moving beyond the trade of raw grain. This new sector proved remarkably resilient. Demand for meat and dairy remained strong, even during times of economic hardship. Cargill continued to diversify. It began producing and processing vegetable oils and expanded into financial and insurance services related to agriculture. But another pivotal moment was just ahead. As the Second World War erupted in Europe, Cargill, riding a new wave of market growth and increasing wartime profits, followed the expansion of U.S. power abroad. The company took a bold step, diversifying into industrial manufacturing, a temporary but highly significant shift. It began building steel ships and barges for the U.S. government. This marked a fundamental turning point. Cargill had transformed from an agricultural operator into an industrial player. After the war, Cargill was well positioned to benefit from the Marshall Plan. Through it, the company secured a recurring stream of income from Europe, laying the foundation for future expansion in Latin America and Asia in the decades to follow. From that moment on, Cargill's role in global dynamics only deepened. Its growing involvement in international conflicts and its alignment with geopolitical powers made Cargill a key player at the negotiating table in matters of global importance. For example, when the global pandemic erupted in 2020, major leaders around the world were trying to understand what kind of impact lay ahead. One of their key concerns was global food security. The most powerful leader in the world, U.S. President Donald Trump, had one key interlocutor to turn to for reassurance, and it was actually Cargill. But all of this certainly did not happen without controversy. Cargill's name first hit headlines in the 1970s with the grain robbery, a secret Soviet grain deal that shook global markets. Then came congressional investigations, pollution fines, and accusations of deforestation in the Amazon. They were tied to food price speculation during the 2008 crisis, to child labor lawsuits in West Africa, and to some of the largest meat recalls in U.S. history. Through it all, Cargill remained mostly invisible to the general public. But despite all of this, Cargill, and as a privately held company, is not required to publicly disclose its financial records. How the company is run, how much it earns, and how much influence it truly wields on the world stage remain open questions, not just for journalists and watchdogs, but for the public at large. And most likely those questions will remain unanswered for a long time. Thank you for watching the video. Please hit the like button here below and subscribe to the channel. See you soon from Vision Economy.